If you look at this plant, we can realize in our direct experience that we don't see the plant. We see an impression of it internally. When you look at me, you don't see me or you don't know me, but you have an impression that's inside you. And in that sense, we never really see life. We are looking at all the impressions inside us that come in through our senses. Smell, hearing, sight, touch. These are all sense impressions, the world of the senses. And that's a very profound thing to realize, because your relationship with these impressions creates your life. It forms your life. To back up though a little bit, a quote here by Master Samael: conscious attention excludes all of that which is called identification. So conscious attention, or pure awareness, this objective awareness that we want to aim towards, not subjective, but objective attention, does not include that which is called identification. Identify. So when you look at something or you receive these senses of the world and you believe that is part of you. Fascination, or we could say fascination of these impressions. Fascination comes when we identify with people, things, ideas, life, etc. Fascination produces the sleep of the consciousness. So we'll go into this. As we just saw, impressions come to us through our senses. What we hear, see, touch. It's like different things in the mind. Now, we have 3 brains, remember? We have intellectual brain, emotional brain. We have the physical, sexual, vital, instinctive brain. This is of the physical body. Now, when we have impressions that come to us, we could have an intellectual reaction about those impressions. So this is essentially what is the identification. We start identifying with the impressions of life and we get fascinated. A sign that we are identified and fascinated is because we have a reaction. Maybe someone insults us and, oh, what, really? Or we see something on the news like, oh my God, something happened. This is a reaction. And we start dreaming about it. It's an impression that goes inside us and stays there. And this is the problem. Impressions that stay inside us. So a lot of people have problems with eating and indigestion. Oh, I ate too much. I'm going to be sick, right? Can't go to the toilet, some pain, right? This is the same with psychic impressions. So we have 3 types of nourishment as a human being. We have oxygen, breathing. Of course, if we don't breathe, we'll die, right? There's physical nourishment. And of course, if we can't digest our food properly and we don't get the correct physical nourishment, we will have pain and suffering, physically, on a physical level. And we also have psychic nourishment. It's part of our life. This is an important thing to understand about our life, that we're here thanks to God, thanks to creation, thanks to divinity, whatever you want to call it. And the impressions of our life is something quite precious. Well, it is our life, all the impressions of our life. Now, if we can't process all these impressions and process the impressions of our life, we get a psychic indigestion too. And that, of course, leads to pain and suffering. I can't process this trauma, this life, it's so heavy. I can't deal with my life. So that's a psychic indigestion. Okay, so just a few examples of how this could happen. Okay, you have an intellectual reaction to something and it stays there. You could have an intellectual reaction, or you could have a profound comprehension and learning about your life with all the impressions that you go through in life. Maybe we have a difficult relationship with someone. Maybe we're having a reaction not just externally, but part of our self, our ideas of ourself, I don't believe I can do this, and I don't believe I'm good enough. This is a reaction, an impression a negative impression that stays inside us. This is how impressions are also forms of nourishment in our life, that they could become a negative reaction, or it helps us to grow and mature spiritually. Because of course, we talk about physical nourishment, and of course it's good if you can digest your food very well and you grow strong and healthy, but we're more concerned here about the spiritual development. And the reality is, we don't know how to digest, because we don't have a physical organ to digest. We have a physical organ to digest food, our stomach, right, and our lungs to breathe oxygen. But to process impressions, we don't have a physical organ for that. We do have a non-physical organ for that, and that's called our consciousness, to become aware, to have conscious attention of the impression, and not to have personal opinions about the impression, but the objective consciousness. As another example, in our other brain, related to our heart and our emotions, all the impressions that we have in life, they could make us serene, wise, peaceful, or they could just give us a lot of disturbance and we become distraught, full of trauma. We become a disturbed kind of person. This is more dangerous because the emotional brain is really related to our physical body. And if we don't feel good, we feel full of negativity, we're going to get illness. This is really where illness begins. When someone starts attacking you, insulting you, you have a lot of problems, but you don't process the impression, it stays inside us. And of course, later on, it will manifest, it will crystallize physically. And of course, this relates to our physical body as well, in the sense that the physical body reacts to. If you're in an argument or you have anger or something, this relates to one of the spheres of hell. That in one of the spheres of hell, or when someone is very angry and they start throwing things, smashing things, slamming doors, this is a sign that the soul is in a certain part of hell. In the different spheres of hell, which we can study much later on, there's different characteristics, but that's one of them. So physical body reacts to. Of course, these impressions could lead to an elevation, an ecstasy, and a deeper understanding of who we are, and of course sexually too. If we are perverse and we do wrong things, then of course we will experience, well, you know what we experience, right? All the suffering related to that. So these impressions, we could say, Master Samael gives a very nice example that our mind is like a lake. When you see nice pictures of lakes, you see a reflection, right? And you can understand life, you can understand things through seeing in the mirror. But reactions are like pebbles that go into the lake and disturb the lake and has ripples. And then, of course, we have a distorted view and vision of reality because we're having reactions. Often, if you have an argument with someone, we just don't understand the reality of them. When you have understanding with someone, you really see, when you put yourself in the shoes of the other, that's more towards the reality. And when you really see that, there's no anger, right? There's no reaction anymore, just understanding and love. That is just one example of these reactions distorting our inner lake, our reflective lake. It's also just good to note that when I make examples of anger, of lust, of pride, of anything, I'm giving very obvious examples. But of course, it's your own journey and responsibility to look more deeper and feel out in this moment, in your experience, your own subtle reactions to the world. Because we're full of reactions. We're full of pebbles that are always hitting our lake. We don't have a serene mind. We might think of egos as sins, of how religion tells us, but really we are full of more subtle egos that we just don't understand, we don't see. We're full of them. It might be a lot of things. You know, we all have, even now I can see quite a few of you frowning a little bit, right? Nothing bad with that, but it means that you're trying to figure something out. You have a lot of thoughts. Of course, these are all pebbles. Of course, if you didn't have that, if you were fully with your being, if you were a master, you would be enlightened and you would understand immediately what is being said with profound comprehension. So there are a lot of very subtle impressions that disturb our mind because we have a lack of meditation, serenity, peace, stillness. We're full of beliefs, full of ideas, full of personal opinions too, about ourselves, about reality, about culture, about society. Maybe we're a very superstitious kind of person. A lot of different voices if we really look very carefully. Yeah. So, reactions that form a karmic life. So, as you know, karma is the result of our unconsciousness. As I said in the beginning, our life is primarily internal. Change the internal, you change the external. But if that internal is unconscious, we create karma and we create problems externally. We don't see it. If we don't see our problems, we don't comprehend them. We will run into problems externally. A dharmic life is to stop those reactions. Dharmic means that we're overcoming our karma. And it's quite obvious when you really start to observe that karma is not a concept or an idea, but that you really see your life and you accept your life as it is, that it's not just a totally random act, but that your life really is orchestrated for you and exactly how you have created it. So our life is a set of karmic impressions. These impressions that arrive to us, and we have our own particular feelings about it, and that becomes our karma. In that sense, our life is our work, or in the Gnostic teaching, we call it a great work, right? Capital G, capital W, the great work, because this is the reason why we have come to this life, to work and observe our life from the beginning to the end, and to understand our relationship towards it. More specifically, relating to this topic, our life is work, and that work is transformation. We come into this life as a soul. We have all of this ego and this reaction towards it that's already exists before we even come into this life. That's okay. But our work is to transform ourselves towards it. Right? And of course, for that, we need self-knowledge. We need to know who we are. We need to know ourselves intellectually, emotionally, with our full being. So, impressions are not meant to be subjective. Generally, they are subjective when they arrive into our senses. We see it and we very quickly have a personal opinion about it. We all might see an animal, a cat or a dog. We all have our own impression. But to actually see it is something else, to actually know what it is. Right? If we all look at the sun outside, we all have our own ideas. Maybe one of us is a scientist who's been studying the sun for a long time, he might look at the sun and all he sees is, mathematical equations and everything. But the reality of the sun is extremely profound. As we know, at least here in these studies, sun relates to the absolute, to the Christ. It's a reality really profound. Einstein, who was a Gnostic in himself, to his own degree, he said that, if you can't look up at the stars at night and be in awe, you're essentially, are you a human being? I can't remember the correct statement, but it's true. We have to have this part of us that sees reality and these impressions of life and perceives life with as little personality as possible, little ego as possible, if we want to understand things. But for that, we have to know ourselves. The more we know ourselves, the more we can perceive life and others and things and people without our own ego. And that's a great tool to have. And we're not condemning the personality or anything like that, but if we have this tool, we're able to apply this conscious attention to the problems of our life and start to understand things quickly. When we're in the spiritual work and we believe we can't overcome a certain ego, that's okay, but it's just a reaction. We have to observe that it's just an intellectual reaction and exercise some conscious attention. Say, okay, fair enough, I have this challenge, but let me just sit down, close my eyes, meditate, and get in touch with my being, with my awareness, and then I'll see the solution. I'll see it. Whatever problem you have, anything, relationships, career, business, spiritual challenges, we can apply this conscious attention to anything and have a solution that comes to us spontaneously, as long as we don't attach ourselves and cling to negative impressions or the impressions that our own personality creates. To be so self-involved and self-considered in our own self. It's a sort of selfishness. But again, it's okay. Personality is natural, but we have to have a space of consciousness outside of that, right? So we must not let these subjective interpretations of reality to reach our mind mechanically. So that means when we're having impressions throughout life, we shouldn't let the impressions come into us mechanically. We're all having impressions here and now in this moment, but they might be coming in mechanically. Are we aware of the impressions that are coming in? Maybe we're a bit more aware now, right? We can sense it, that we're observing the impressions. But when we go out in life, we kind of just daydream and walk like a zombie. And all these impressions come in until we don't know that at some point we get indigestion because we've eaten too much and haven't digested anything. In a sense, meditation is to digest everything we've gone through in life. That's why it's often said that when people start doing meditation now, they feel a little bit of serenity or something, but they haven't meditated for so many years, decades. Sometimes people meditate and say they don't feel anything, but actually it can take years to process everything, all the subconscious layers. Remember that we have 3% essence, 97% ego. It takes a long time to let all the impressions of life settle. Let all of those pebbles drop to the bottom. And don't throw any more pebbles in. And then we start to see reality. We start to be enlightened. We start to see something. We start to have knowledge. So then the practice is to make a conscious effort. We must transform these impressions at the moment of the entrance to the mind. To be conscious all the time. To be aware. Master Samael always says, to be like a watchman in the time of war. When a person's always watching for the enemy to come. It's always like this, waiting, or binoculars, or like a lighthouse. And as soon as an enemy comes, he alerts the whole team, the whole army. Says, someone's coming, get ready. If we're not ready, and we go around in life, just unconsciously, enemies enter, negative impressions enter, and we get this build-up of impressions, and we become a mess, chaos. Imagine you have a day, you go out, you start your day with someone insulting you, your family is telling you to do this and that, and you get into a negative mood, and then you go to work and you get very stressed because your boss scolded you, and then, but you're not paying attention to anything, right? And then you go throughout your whole day, you go back home, you go to your wife, she asks you to do something, you explode. These are impressions, negative impressions that are in indigestion. So this is a very powerful way to understand these impressions or this aspect of life, because usually we talk in terms of ego, it's very personal, but this is more scientific, a scientific psychological understanding. Because first, before ego, impressions come. Then it is our choice as to whether those impressions turn into ego or we just let it go. There's a story by the Buddha. There's a lot of people sitting in front of him and someone insults the Buddha, but he's serene, he's happy, there's no problem. One of his disciples asked him, Buddha, why did you let him insult you like that? Aren't you going to do anything about it? And he said, an insult is like a gift. You can accept the gift, and then the gift is with you. Or if you don't accept the gift, then it stays with the the giver. Impressions are just like that. You can accept the negativity of the impression, or you can just let it pass. That's it, right? So, we have to live in a way that we are conscious all the time and always aware. We talk a lot in these studies about ego, dissolving the ego. We want to get rid of it, and we might start to get fascinated with the idea that we're doing very well. Usually when we think we're doing very well, that's when, right, we have an idea, an impression of ourselves, and when we start to get complacent, we get lazy, and then we start to fail. It's about not holding ideas, not holding beliefs, but to be vigilant. It's this state of consciousness that is aware, awake, vigilant, without holding anything in the mind, just to be here and now, present. So, for example, negative moods, excuses, self-considerations, justifications, etc., they must be counteracted in the moment with what we call a conscious shock. Conscious shock is very powerful, and we're able to do it if you have the strength to do it, the willpower to do it. Imagine you're in the middle of an argument with someone. Most people just go through the argument, they continue arguing. But it is possible that if you are energetic enough, conscious enough in that moment, no, I won't be like this. I'm going to give a hug to the person and say, sorry, it's okay. Let's just let's not argue about this, You're my friend, you're my partner.
You're the boss.
You're the boss, right? Anything. Relax, right? Yeah, exactly. And so that's what we can call a conscious shock. Not in an egoic way, but to the consciousness. You wake up out of the impression and you let go of the impression. The sad thing is, for most people, you have the negative impression, and because whatever, they're suffering, they don't have love in their life or something like that, they hold it inside themselves. Many years sometimes. It becomes who they are, and then it becomes how their life is too. They hold this bitterness. Sometimes you can feel it with some people. It's like in their aura, in their vibration. They're holding on to so much pain, holding on to so much impressions that they haven't processed for so many years. It's so unconscious. It's in darkness because they don't even know about it. And if you tell them about it, they won't admit it because they don't know. That is the definition of unconsciousness, unawareness, darkness.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What if, you said, right, that this life is an act, so it's like a play or drama.
Yeah.
So, what if you decide to experiment that, you know that you have done this before, that whenever someone insults you, this is your reaction. The next time you try to experiment, what if I do this as a reaction? But you're conscious that this is what you're going to do.
You could try, but then you are voluntarily going into the darkness. And you're still going to experience the pain of the darkness. We should always remember why we come to these studies. Because we want to be in the light. And we should want to work for the light and be in the light and act of the light. Of course, if we are going to voluntarily try something that we know is going to have a negative outcome, then of course you'll pay the price. You might learn a little bit, yeah. I know what you're saying, maybe you'll learn something, right?
And you know that it is something that is for the both good, for the common, both of you.
So you mean it might be good if you still react, but consciously?
There are some instances, right, that sometimes, there's maybe an argument like that, and then you confront the person.
I see. Confrontation.
Like that.
Conscious confrontation.
Yes.
But that's okay, that's not a reaction. Confrontation can be a very healthy thing. If we feel in that moment that we need that, it's important, right? We can't just, right, what's the opposite of consciousness? It's ignorance. And we don't want to ignore things. So, for example, a common thing is in a couple, if a couple has a conflict, we shouldn't react, but we do need to talk about it. We need to confront what's on the table, but in a manner and an atmosphere that is serene, happy, light-hearted, and understanding, right? Yeah. But I think some people try to do that, but they're still not conscious that, or admitting to themselves that they're still holding a little bit of negative feeling about it, an ill feeling. And of course, if you try to confront with that ill feeling still inside you, then there's going to be, it will manifest into more conflict. So we have to be, that's why that's the teaching of sacrifice as well, to first transform internally, and then your external relationships will transform too, in that sense, the example that you gave. Yeah. So, like you kind of just said, life is one big impression that we do not digest objectively and consciously. That's life. Of course, if we absolutely live like that, just no consciousness at all about our life, it's obvious then, if we understand the teachings of the recurring lives, past lives, we continue with the same impression in the next life and the same spiritual challenges. That's why we say we must die before we die. Die to the ego, so that by the time you die physically, you don't have to continue the learning. Often when people die, you go visit them in the afterlife, they're going through challenges, which we call hell, that are trying to get the person to face their darkness. That's the definition of hell. So we did this in previous lives. Okay, so all of our challenges, our particular challenges, is a result of in our previous lives, we had this, we had all of these impressions that we weren't able to face. We weren't able to face ourselves, right? To face impressions is to face ourselves, ultimately. Okay. So, as we said, impressions either digest into consciousness or indigest into dreams. Impressions come. What are you going to hold inside yourself as a dream? Now, you start dreaming about life. You start creating your own subjective reality about the world. In other words, they transform into egos. The energy of those impressions stay inside us and it becomes part of our own ego. We don't live in reality anymore. Therefore, transforming impressions goes hand in hand with ego death. As we just gave with the example, if you're in an argument and you suddenly let go of the impression, you also have to let go of an ego too, right? It takes a realization in that moment to stop doing that. The same goes with addictions, anything, that in that moment, give a conscious shock. I'm not going to fall into this addiction. So through this alertness, to have this conscious shock, it's through alertness and willpower. Okay, remember, I'm going to just remind you of will, because it's willpower is what we need to give a conscious shock and escape the impression that we're under, the spell that we're under, right? Because I think that a lot of people, from what I've observed, is that we try to get out of an impression through thoughts. Oh, this horrible thing has happened to me. Why has it happened? It's going to be like this. Why is it like this? They start thinking. You can't get out of an impression through thinking. Maybe through some reason. There's a superior part of thoughts that helps us to reason to get us to the will. But we have to understand this teaching that will is superior to thoughts. And it is also superior to emotions. When people have problems in life, sometimes if they're a very emotional person, they'll seek solitude in their emotions because they can't have the will to get out or process it or get out of it. Maybe they listen to a certain type of music in ignorance, like this, or maybe rap music, angry music, right? They say that they're venting, maybe, But it's okay, again. And this adds to the teaching from last time. There is inferior emotions and there is superior. Inferior, superior. The superior emotions lead us to the conscious will. Inferior emotions keep us suffering and in ego. So examples of superior emotions. Maybe you start to feel the beauty. You start to realize the beauty of challenges in life. Superior thoughts might be to be reasonable, rational. And maybe when your mind starts to remember teachings like this, right? Religious or spiritual teachings that help you in the moment, that's part of superior thoughts, okay? The main thing I want to say here is that the will is superior. The will helps us to get out of the impression, okay? So it's the willpower. Remember, above the willpower is the being, the consciousness. It's a greater intelligence than yourself. It's beyond your personality, beyond your ego. The willpower is what, I'm just turning it around again. The willpower is what connects us to the being, to God, we can say. Right? In those moments when we struggle, we don't know what to do, we use some prayer, meditation. Prayer is a form of meditation when done correctly. Something speaks to us and we realize what to do, what is the right thing. That's the consciousness speaking to us, right? So, willpower. And to be alert from moment to moment. That's what we need to digest impressions. So willpower, the consciousness, must digest the impressions. That is the organ that digests the impressions. People who have lost their consciousness, which also relates to the conscience, people who don't know right from wrong, of course, they get lost spiritually. So for example, someone gives us someone looks at us just an evil glare, right? They look at us in a bad way. We might get a very negative impression about that. So we have to transform that internal impression. And that, of course, transforms the external. If someone gives you an evil look, you have that choice then. Of course, if you react mechanically, you might get into a fight, go to prison, go to jail, right? You might kill the person. But you transform your life if you transform the impression. It's as simple as that. So, Samael says here, receive the unpleasant manifestations of people and life, circumstances, with gladness, no matter what. Just be happy. Doesn't matter. Even if someone does something bad or you have a lot of challenges, you have a difficult circumstance, be happy. Otherwise, how will you move forward? You'll stay in that situation, circumstance. So we also have here another example of, and this relates to bad or wrong when we transform impressions in the wrong way. We're not using the consciousness to transform them. So for example, don't transform impressions personally. It's not a personal thing. I have this difficult thing in my mind I can't get rid of. Let me try to think in a personal, emotional, intellectual way, in an egoic way. So for example, there's an example of a waitress that, okay, you're sitting at the table and the waitress, because she's very respectful and she's professional, she smiles at you. Or this can be related to anything, a person on the street, anything. Because they're a very respectful person, they smile at you. But you think, because they smiled at you, that they really like you, that there's an attraction there. But it's not. That's a wrong impression. It's subjective. The person is just professional and smiling and very polite and respectful. Right? So that's one example of a bad impression. The impression has gone into the wrong center. It's gone into this center, right? The sexual center. So it has to be transformed with the essence. Okay? Bad transformation leads to wrong conclusions of life. That leads to egoic beliefs about the world. You know, I know someone who, they had a very difficult, traumatic experience, and they were once religious. They couldn't process the very traumatic experience. So they just, in how they dealt with that impression of that experience was that they concluded that God is bad, God is evil. And so, but that was their way of coping. And so that turned into a belief for the rest of his life. Right? He formed that belief in I think in his 30s. He's like almost 70 now. And he still holds it very, very strongly. I think it's someone I know personally, but I think it's finally, now that he's in old age, it's crumbling away a little bit. But, it's just an example of how we can transform impressions in the wrong way too. Okay, and just to relate this all to meditation and astral projection, because this is a profound thing to understand too. psychologically and scientifically. Meditation is essential. Meditation, in this sense, is to go beyond the senses, to meditate in a way that we are not absorbed in the world of the senses and everything that we've learned from the senses, but that we direct our attention inwards and try to go beyond the senses. And there's a space beyond our senses, beyond our impressions, that is an intelligence and a beauty and a serenity, all of the superior things of our being. Now, meditation is essential, or build-up occurs. So, essentially, the reason why we are also not conscious when we're sleeping, because to be conscious while we're sleeping means astral projection, that we would be awake. The reason why we're not awake is because we're in dreams still. Now, if we were, let's say tonight, before we go to bed, we meditate in such a way that all the impressions of our life are processed in a profound way. We have ecstasy, enlightenment because of it, because we're with our being then. We have no more impressions that we hold, no more attachments. We have freedom of consciousness. It's obvious then that when we go to sleep, we would be in the astral in a very conscious and profound way, right? We would experience something divine because we're with divinity. But if not, if we go to sleep as we usually do, and especially if we had a very difficult day where we can't process what we went through in the day, of course we will dream about those difficulties that we had during the day. The dream state is just a way, it's a way for the consciousness to force you to process them. But you're processing them in an unconscious way, because most of the time we wake up and we don't even remember our dreams. We don't even remember the process of trying to process them. And if it's really bad, we have nightmares, recurring nightmares, because even in the subconsciousness, we can't even process it. So we have nightmares, just impressions that are just lodged so deeply because we don't want to face it. So the opposite side of that, of course, again, is if we commit to meditation, to all of these practices, to have willpower, then we will have consciousness, more space during the night as well. And we would have more profound experiences during the sleep state. Yeah. Okay? Yes, that's everything. Any questions?
I noticed that even if you're not really stressing out about anything in your life right now, you're calm and serene.
Yeah.
There's just really a random firing of thoughts in your mind, maybe some words Matt said to you 3 years ago, or even some things you remember you want to do in a few weeks' time, like that. I thought this is really tricky, and so I thought it's funny sometimes that this is how ego really works in your mind, that tries to fool you, to make you feel a certain way so that you'd react like that.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, there it goes, another ego, and then I'm thinking it's like I'm holding a tennis racket and then like just throwing it away like that.
Yeah. The key is not to do anything, no reaction, not even shove it away. Just be like the Buddha, don't even accept it anymore. Yeah. Imagine like someone who is not doing any spiritual work, not looking within. Of course, we know that they have a build-up of so much of these old impressions, no matter how many years ago they are. And they don't know they have that. But once you start doing the spiritual work, you start meditating, you start changing and knowing yourself, of course, you're going to start seeing them. But it's like a purification process, and it's also a test. Can you be in your being infinite patience, no reaction, and recognize that it's not you? You are not identified with it because you realize your true nature, your being, and but there's a superior desire, also known as bhakti, spiritual desire to be with God, longing to be with God, divinity, to be conscious and awake. So if you can remain like that, still in your center, nothing can move you from that center. eventually it will go. Because symbolically, the ego is also like an entity inside us that comes to us. It needs feeding with some energy, some emotion, some thoughts, some feelings. If you don't give it, it will starve and it will die. But it also transforms because the consciousness that is inside it escapes and goes back to you.
Some people also think that the enlightenment will come from outside. Now, if the other person only behaves a certain way, I will feel okay, forgetting that the journey is within.
Yeah.
For a very long time, I thought like that. If only the world will behave a certain way, I'll be okay. And I came to realize that I have actually the power, the conscious ability to just not allow it to affect me, to process it.
Yeah. It's a nice excuse for the ego to not
to do the work.
Yeah, exactly. I'll just wait one day until the world is. Yeah. I'll wait until my wife is perfect, and then I'll be better. Yeah, until your parents are perfect, then you'll be good. I was kind of like that actually, growing up with my mum. I was a bit naughty in that sense. I always looked at her mistakes, right? Like was it the Christ that said it? Why do you look at the splinter in your brother's eye and you don't see the plank in your own, right?
While I was listening, random thoughts. I'm listening to you. I still have random thoughts that I don't consciously. It just comes to me.
Yeah.
Like, for example, I was thinking about the life of a certain actress, like that. While I was listening to you.
Yeah.
And
that's good. It's good that you become conscious of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I also trying to formulate my question while I was listening to you about my friend.
Mm-hmm.
So
you're learning to listen to. Most people don't listen because there's so much. So that's how we learn to listen, to not listen to the thoughts so much, but try to really listen to the person, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and then just for contemplation. What you said that I should be back to my conscious self, and then those are my egos. Those are things that I have to discover why I'm not present.
Yes. Yeah, that's part of the work on the ego. That no matter what is inside, just to comprehend it. Sometimes it doesn't take so much analysis and comprehension and looking into the darkness so much. Sometimes it can be very quick. The consciousness is quite simple and quick. But sometimes if it's more difficult, like we have a gambling addiction or something, right? This takes more serious, sit down with it and really understand something. It takes a longer process. But sometimes with the more subtle thoughts that you said, sometimes it's more about just practice. Just be here and realize the importance of being present, yeah.
So, if I feel like there's still more that, it's like in my everyday life, like if I have random thoughts, what if I feel like I need to go deeper?
Mm-hmm. In the moment, if it's light, you can face it there and then. If it has a very strong emotional charge, there's a big resistance intellectually too, and in the body, it's better to wait later. And then later, when you've calmed down, when you feel at peace, go for a walk, go see some friends, anything that relaxes you. And then later on, recall what happened. And then we have the retrospective meditation. I'm not sure if you might have... Okay. So the retrospective meditation. You sit down in meditation, go into your serenity, relax, and then you live through it again. You connect with your being first, and then you live through it in your imagination. And by doing that, you get a new level of comprehension through it. But it's a very dense and difficult one. So that's when the retrospective meditation should be used. Maybe before sleep. Sometimes it's a normal practice for me that every time before I go to sleep, I might see impressions that were difficult for me during the day. I had stress, irritation, something. And I'll usually, for me right now, it's more natural that I have this natural instinct to process my impressions before, in my night meditation. But of course, if there was very big ego, then yeah, we should give attention to it. Yeah. But not in an egoic way, right? Because we can have an ego and then we can react to that again and, oh, this is so difficult. No, we really need to meditate with our being, our essence, our consciousness. And if we're able to, without identifying, we can even say, I don't identify with this. I am not this. And then look at it. Just look at it with conscious attention. And some kind of understanding will come from it. Yeah.
So we're talking about transforming impressions. And the way you teach it is so easy to hear. And, you know, like, oh, that's so easy to transform your impression is something. But if you really, like, think about it, it's so hard. You know why?
Yes.
Because we're like a human nature that we have senses and impression comes from our senses and we're alive. So every time something happens, we always have impression. I was just thinking, I'm like, oh, to transform impression. And I'm gonna ask a question because you might be like, I'm saying that you're a normal person like us, but your being might be higher from all of us. I wanna ask, like, how did you make it easy, or do you make it like share something simple things that could make us really change what would be an impression we could have? Because you know,
Right, yeah. Well, as I just said, it takes time. And I have, in my own way, I've been learning all this since I was 20. So that's 12 years. So I'm not perfect, right? But sometimes I have the ability, to really be okay. Yeah, sometimes not, but it takes time. Yeah. But like you said, the teaching makes it really clear and really nice, right? Master Samael gives this teaching really clear. But if I wanted to make it harder for you, maybe I should, instead of doing this or the practical exercise, I'll just insult you all, and see if you can.
I find it helpful in a way. As being a partner with you, you're always like severe with me, and I'm very emotional. Yes, at first I always cry. I always say, what's wrong with this?
But
man, so problematic on so much things and making it a small thing a big thing. But and later on, by being really makes me understand that severe is the more easy way to find reality and
right.
good in life.
Right.
Oh.
We agree.
Baby needs. So what's the opposite of severity? The baby needs mercy. Right? That's why he's complaining. So the two pillars, or what we see here, the two pillars of the tree of life, severity, mercy. These things need to be balanced. So of course, it's not always good that sometimes I'm severe and say, I need to get in touch with my feminine mercy side too. This is masculine, feminine. That's why mental thoughts, men are always rational, like this, you should be like this, like this. Woman is more caring, emotional, nice. That's mercy. We need balance between this. And that's the balance of that connects us to our will. Yeah. That's why sometimes if we have severity or an argument, we always end it in love too, because it needs that balance. So we understand it. If I'm just severe, of course, if I do that too much, I should look at myself and it might be my ego.
Talking about reality.
Yeah.
Severe, and I take it very severe. And we're not going into the what you said, the normal and the loving part until I take it in and understand it. Of course, So I'm like, it makes me understand things fast to stop what's going on in the house.
Yeah.
Yeah. But is the impression is it called unconscious thoughts?
That severity that comes through the thoughts is a provoking an ego, right? Yeah. Which is a little bit easier to do when you're in a relationship where we've both agreed that we're going to change and grow. And then we've agreed that we can point out some egos sometimes. You can point out mine. Of course, that's difficult if the other partner, doesn't want that. We have to be respectful. So yes, when we point out something, of course, we are offering in a provocative way you'll get some negative impressions, but it's to help to guide or to be aware that, hey, look, so I pointed out a possible problem. Now you're having a negative impression. I didn't necessarily know if you would have a negative impression, but the fact that you are having one shows that there is something to be transmuted and transformed.
It's already there. It's already, the pain and suffering is already there. We're just pressing the button. Bring it out into the
Yeah. Pressing just gently. Gently. Or not. Right. It needs.
I was saying that to everyone that's listening, that when someone like insult you, in a way, it depends what your impression is. But if you feel like, you have negative something, look in yourself because something is really wrong. Maybe the insult is right, because if the insult is nothing to you and doesn't connect something about yourself, it's nothing. For example, someone said, "You're ugly." I'm gonna say nothing, because I feel like I'm beautiful, right? But if someone said, "You're ugly," and I'm like, "No, I'm not ugly." Yeah, of course, inside it already showed insecurity.
Insecurity, vanity, different things. Yeah.
I can relate to what she's saying. One time I went to rehab to do a counseling session with an addict, and the addict said, I attended the 12 Steps NA meeting in Redemptorist, and they all said there that you have no friends in the fellowship. If that is, he's trying to insult me, he's trying to push a button. And me, I personally just, being famous with a bunch of addicts is like being the most popular insane person in an asylum. So I have that belief. So I don't actually pursue the approval of drug addicts. So, but I don't know. I can take it as an insult, or I can process it with my essence and say, "Oh, he's trying to press my button to get a reaction from me." I cannot be dragged down in that. The Bible says in the Songs of Solomon, to be dragged into negativity is like being a cow with a ring on your nose being pulled in various directions. And I think that's the beauty of enlightenment, that's the beauty of awareness, that's the beauty of consciousness. Because you know exactly where the other person is coming from. And most of the time, it has nothing to do with me.
That's why we have the teaching here, that the doorway to the realization of doing that, of processing it in that way and giving that shock, is to overcome this self-consideration. It's a form of selfishness, right? What's the opposite of the Christ, of sacrifice? Self-consideration. Stop considering yourself a minute, really consider the other person. If you have no consideration, you're okay. There won't be anything. So Master Samael, in this teaching, he also says, in his own way, I'm paraphrasing, that it's generally quite easy to do this work when you realize you are just nothing. You're just a speck of dust in this cosmos. You're worth nothing. You are nothing. Of course, your being, your divinity is worth something. But you as a person, human person that's going to die, go to the grave, get eaten by insects, nothing. What we need is a lack of self-importance. It's like, I'm not so important. I live for the other person.